1, I'd like to call to order the Mesa Water District Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, December 12th. And would you please all rise and join Director Atkinson in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Atkinson. Now is the time for public comments on items that are not on the agenda. There will be a time later to talk about agenda items. Is there anyone here tonight from the public that would like to speak on non-agendized items? If so, come to the podium or raise your hand. Seeing no one, I will close the public comments. General Manager Schoenberg, are there any items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered on the agenda?
There are none, sir.
Thank you. Tonight, there's no consent calendar items. So that will bring us to presentation and discussion item number 1. General Manager Schoenberger.
Yes, and as we do once a year, we update our water cost comparison between Mesa Water and our neighboring water districts. And Raftellus Financial Advisors are the ones who do this study for us, and I would like our CFO, Andrew Hamilton, to introduce our speaker.
President, members of the Board of Directors. I'd like to introduce Habib Isaac. He's the manager at Raftellus Financial Consultants, Inc. He specializes in utility financial planning and rate design. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Applied Mathematics, and he also has extensive experience in financial and utility rate modeling, serving public agencies for over 10 years. Mr. Isaac.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Isaac. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Board President and directors of the board. Thank you, Andrew, as well, staff, and the public. So this is something you commission every year, and we update it accordingly. One thing we want to do is show you a cost comparison of your district and as well as utility districts throughout the Southern California area. So what is the objective of the study? Essentially, we want to find a feasible methodology to do a fair apples-to-apples cost comparison between water districts. That's the ultimate goal. So a couple things we look at is utility rates, but you'll find that that doesn't tell the whole story. So we look at other measurements and metrics to give a better understanding of the entire picture. So the first graph that you see here is kind of light on the visual, but let me just quickly go through this. These are all the counties of California, and the bars represent the total average cost of your customers, where the red color of the bar represents the fixed charge and the blue represents the commodity charges, or based on the usage of your customer. You will find that Orange County as a whole is on the very low end in comparison with others throughout the state of California. It's 45.41. Then, drilling down a little bit further, on the next slide, what we do is we look at the water districts within Orange County. And this is also looking at just the utility rates, the fixed charge, as well as the commodity charge. But again, that does not necessarily tell you the entire picture. What we have here is in the red is the commodity charges of the different water districts. And then the blue is the fixed charge. You will find that Mesa Water, the average is $56.25 for a 3/4 inch meter, using, on average of the entire county, is around 15 units of water. So that's what we use for the comparison. Ultimately, the percent of commodity charges is right around over 70% to 80%. But again, there's other items that go into offsetting costs and mitigating utility rates. So one thing that we're looking at is since the utility rate doesn't tell the entire picture, there's other components that go into it, such as the geographic locations, if you have different elevations, also the intensity of your capital improvement plan, any mandates. So those type of items really affect what utility rates reflect. So one thing we wanted to look at is what about other non-operating revenues? There's other agencies throughout this area that also get property tax and has special districts or special taxes to fund those costs. So what you find here on this next graph is reflecting what are some other revenue sources of these districts within Orange County. The blue represents utility rates. And as you can see, Mesa Water, that's the primary revenue source. And then, but other districts have other sources such as property taxes, where some agencies have it, some agencies don't. But ultimately, the last column at the bottom shows you how much of the revenue is coming from rates. For Mesa, it's predominantly from rates, whereas other districts have other offsetting revenues. So because of that, we decided what's another way that we can measure and compare costs. So one thing we decided to do was similar to how you report your consumption on a per capita basis, we decided it makes sense to also look at your expenditures on a per capita basis as well to try to get more apples to apples comparison. We were able to download that information from the state controllers. There's a report that comes out every year from the special districts and a report that shows operations, maintenance, as well as debt. And then we took the population information from MODOC. Now looking at this, in 2010, when we did the report, we found on a cost per capita, which is represented by the bars in green, you'll find that Mesa Water is on the very low end. So in terms of the efficiency, you're providing very cost-effective approach to your utility. On a cost per capita is right around $230. Similarly, we decided to also look at 2011, and the reason why this is 2 years behind is because the State Controller's Office only puts out the report every so often. So we update this every year, but it's always reflecting 2 years behind the current year. And you'll see, again, now what's plotted is the blue bars are 2011 information. Again, you'll see that Mesa Water is on the low end. Instead of 230 is 251, and essentially that's could be accounted for just the cost of living. As we move on, looking at just 2011, this is what's represented in the bars in blue. And another thing we wanted to show was just plotting those numbers. It's the same information, but just on a different graph, where we show the population on the horizontal axis, and we show the cost per that population on the vertical axis. So you'll see, as I'm identifying, Mesa Water is right around that $250. You're on the low end in comparison to all your other local agencies. And then when we compare it from also plotting 2010 information, we also see what is the increase in those differences. Again, you're very close to where you were last year, whereas other agencies really see some significant spikes in their cost per capita. So as you know, it's very clear that water is a vital resource, and the higher percentage that you have on your commodity charges reflects and promotes water conservation. And one thing that reflected on one of the graphs was that your commodity charge represents roughly 80% of your total revenue. And what this concludes in terms of that cost comparison, using on a per capita basis, it reflects that it's very clear that you're very cost effective, and it's also a more cost effective way, or I should say a more accurate way of comparing costs within jurisdictions, instead of just utility rates, which may not tell the full story because not everyone funds all their costs through their utility rates. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Isaac. Directors, any questions? Mr.
President.
Mr. Isaac, Director Bachmeier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Isaac, thank you very much. If you could go back to the slides, which would be, I think it's about 4 slides before the end of the presentation. Your scatter plot.
Yes.
Okay, that one. So, and the other one shows the same thing.
Yes.
One of the things that's often thought about is, and I've heard this many times since I've been on this board, is that larger agencies tend to be more efficient. What I see from your scatter plot is that there is some truth to that, is that larger agencies do tend to get better. But it seems that there's no significant improvement from above 50,000 populations served and above. That, at least in the Orange County sample, and this is probably too small of a data set to be completely accurate this way, but it does seem to me that there's no great gain, certainly beyond 100,000 people, but looks like even beyond 50,000 people, there's no great gain in a per capita efficiency. Is that a reasonable conclusion from the data presented?
The exact threshold would be difficult to identify, but in terms of our experience, it's very common to actually, you do gain economies of scale, where when we're doing financial planning for agencies 50 years to 100 years, one thing that we take into account is the fact that it's not going to be a one-to-one relationship of the number of employees that you need to serve that community or that constituency. So because of that, you definitely are always going to be reflecting an economy of scales as the population grows.
So you would say that this Irvine Ranch is more efficient than Mesa Water, even though its per capita is lower because it physically has more people served? I'm not sure that's justified from the data.
Not necessarily. In general, what I'm saying is that you do gain efficiency, economies of scale when you do grow, but that could be counteracted by their particular expenses in one year versus another, or even what type of cost rate structure that they have. So it's all dependent on other variables, but in general, you should see some economies of scale as you grow compared to a very small agency.
So and I tend to agree with that. Where I'm going with this is it doesn't seem that there's that much gain once you get above a certain size based on this data set.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, because essentially you're only going to have one finance director. You're only going to have one general manager. So as you keep growing, you're not going to then gain more efficiencies at a certain point.
Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. President.
Vice President Duane.
Hi, thanks very much for coming this evening. It's an excellent presentation. And just, for the purposes of educating the audience, can you tell us a little bit more about who Raftellus is and the credentials of the company, and
Sure.
why we should listen to you?
Sure, no problem. Raftellus is solely focused on financial planning for water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. That's our primary focus, as well as rate design for those agencies and those enterprises if it's a city. We've been around for 25 years, and we are throughout the entire state, as well as national presence on the East Coast as well as in the Midwest. From our last analysis, we have worked with just over 25% of all the utility districts in nationally. So we also are very active in the associations of AWWA, WEF, Aqua, and it's very common for us to speak at panels and talk about certain items related to water districts.
So you guys are a legitimate third-party objective authority that can advise the board on the proposals, submittals, what I like to call is the optimal capital structure of the district. You're obviously well qualified to do that and have recognized by outside third parties to do
Yes.
so. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And many times we're actually asked to do peer reviews of other consultants' work.
So just, asking a question here, one of the discussions on the board frequently regarding our rate design and rate modeling and capital structure of this district is what I refer to as the intergenerational transfer of the capital cost of the district. As you know, the lifetime of the facilities are very long, and in my opinion, it would be unfair to burden this generation with all of the capital cost while not, shifting any of the cost to future generations who will enjoy the benefit of the utility for many years to come after this current generation of ratepayers has passed on. Do you have can you give us any insight into how, a intergenerational rate design study balances that fairness?
Sure. One thing we look at is what is the expense that you're incurring. So the more regional that expense is, the more you're going to want to look at making sure that you're spreading that cost over multiple generations and not just on the burden of the current customer base because of the lifespan of that improvement. We also take into account what is your growth projections of the area, because not only is it the capital cost, it's also who else is going to benefit from it in the future besides those customers that exist today. And then based on that, what we would do is do a fair share allocation between whether the new growth, existing customers, and then how you actually going to fund it. So there's three components to that. And then commonly, when you allocate costs to future growth, then that's when you update your connection fees.
Okay.
So,
Yes, thank you very much. So then back to your presentation on your slide number 4.
this one right here?
Sorry, slide number 6.
Yes.
So the revenue sources as described, rates, Mesa's showing 83% of our rate comes, or the revenue for the district comes from the rate that is charged to the consumer.
Yes.
Whereas, for example, I believe that's SCWD and South Coast Water District, 83% of theirs comes from rates, but then you see an additional 11% coming from property tax. Could you describe for the members of the audience here why that is important? Mesa has 0, South Coast Water District gets 11%, although the rate, the element of the rate still provides for 83% of the revenue. Why is that important?
Sure. It's somewhat unfortunate as well that this is all based on, with property tax, based on Prop 13. And in Prop 13, when it was enacted, it was based on what was the allocations in 1978. So if there was an agency that actually was doing very well or didn't exist at that time, they wouldn't get any tax allocation of the 1%. So other agencies actually do get it, and then it goes on in perpetuity. The important part about that is these revenue sources, when it's property tax, could be used for any purpose, and a lot of times that's going to offset your capital expenses. Primarily, most water districts or special districts use property tax for capital. Whereas other districts that don't have that source of revenue, you're primarily going to have to fund it through your utility rates. You really don't have a choice. So that's why we want to not only look at utility rates, because it doesn't tell you the entire picture of some districts.
So would you say that it's fair then that the receipt of property tax distorts the actual cost to the ratepayer of the utility commodity product that they're purchasing? Is that a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement, correct.
Okay, so then if we could go back to slide number 4, this is the comparison of water rates. This would be the utility charge.
Yes,
This is what I'm
only.
assuming, only. Okay, and so if we compared, for example, Mesa Water District, we have a commodity charge of $42.75. And if we go across the page to the Irvine Ranch Water District, their commodity charge appears to be much lower at $15.20. Why is that?
Yeah, that's contributed to the fact that they have significant amount of property tax revenue that could offset the amount that they need to recover from utility rates. And then it also is dependent on what amount of special districts they have, because besides property tax, they could also have funding from special districts, such as special taxes related to an assessment, a standby charge, or Melrose district. Mm-hmm. And then also above and beyond that is the amount that's coming from their fixed revenue versus their commodity charge.
Okay, and then in their case as well, isn't it correct to say that they have what's called an inclining block rate, so that your first drop of water is less expensive than your last drop of water, and that they set thresholds? As you pass through those thresholds, you pay a penalty rate where it doubles, triples, and quadruples, I believe, is the way the schedule works, so that if you use more than the allocation that you're given, the board of directors makes a subjective decision on how much water each consumer should use, and if you go through that subjective evaluation, then you would pay some inclining rate on that commodity. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So for this example, it was 15 units of water, and every agency in this graph has different annual usage characteristics, but in totality, it's around 15. But that also doesn't provide the full picture, because if I change this from 15 units to, say, 30 units, you might find that Irvine, because of their block schedule, you go into those other tiers that is significantly more, that has a higher price compared to the lower tiers that they're getting for 15 units of water. So if I did different usage characteristics, it could be flip-flopped, and you would see Irvine skyrocket, because I think if I recall, their highest rate is over $8 a unit.
I believe it is as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. And then, so finally, if I understand the logic of the presentation and the analysis that we use here, the only way to strip out all of these distorting variables is to compare it on the total cost of operation, and then spread that total cost of operation over the total number of the population served, and that's what gives us this per capita number. Is that correct?
That's correct, and it makes it more static as opposed to being adding more variables to such as the utility rate structure.
And
That's
so in
correct.
your professional opinion, you would say that this is a fair basis for comparison and provides valuable information to the board upon which we make our decisions.
Yes, I agree, especially when you see trend. This also, you can use this on an annual basis, because we keep compiling this. If you see a slight spike in that cost per capita, then that'll make you look into it more as to why. But this is definitely a good measuring or metric to utilize to determine your efficiency.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other directors have any questions?
Mr. President, just one follow-up.
Director Bachmiller?
Thank you. Yes, Vice President Dwayne brought up an excellent point, so I just wanted to make sure that I understood. For the Irvine Ranch, there's a lot of other agencies there that have inclining block rates as well, but the Irvine Ranch one, where you have the commodity at $15.20 for 15 units, so you used there what they call the, not the conserving rate, which I think is less than $1 a unit, but you use their minimum non-conserving rate or their average user rate or something of that sort, because then they have their what they call excessive, wasteful, and abusive, I think, are their higher tiers.
Right.
They label you abusive.
I don't recall exactly the terms, but this will be their efficiency rate.
So this would be their lowest rate?
Correct.
Okay, so this would be assuming that your allocation for your particular 3/4-inch meter that you were allocated to have as many as 15 units that you could use, and that unit, you would get that lowest rate. But if you went, say, your allocation was lower, then you might go over and into the wasteful or more abusive rate.
That's correct.
And that would significantly distort that cost. Okay, thank you. Excellent presentation.
Director Atkinson first.
Director Atkinson?
Yes. If I might, on your slide 3, your chart indicates average fixed and average variable. And so my question is, the variability there among the fixed against variable charges against the various counties, is that an indication of is the variable average an indication of the amount of water used in those various counties?
No, it's in terms of the amount of their costs that they recover through the variable charge, through the commodity rates.
Okay.
So with Orange County, you will find that just by the representation of the blue, more revenue on average is recovered through the commodity charges versus the fixed charges. Whereas with Sacramento, more of their revenue on average is recovered through the fixed charge. So they have very high fixed charges and very low commodity rates.
Okay, thank you.
Director Timianka.
I would just say, going along with the Director Bachmeller's points, with tiered rates becoming more and more of an issue, and with our board here being very much in support of the true cost of water and having a flat rate, I would just suggest maybe in years future, since this is an annual comparison, to maybe have additional slides going back to the previous one that shows different usages, so that we could see actual true cost of water, with us being one of the few that is a flat cost of water. So maybe we could see at 20 and 25, 30, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. It probably makes sense to show different usage characteristics, 'cause
Right.
not everyone's going to be at 15 units.
Exactly. So just going in the future,
Okay.
would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Timianka. Any other comments, directors? Thank you, Mr. Isaac. Just a couple comments is, one, I know when we first did this, we did this just to find out where we stood. We didn't know where we were going to stand, and so we've been very pleased to be the most efficient for a couple years running now. So that was good to see. Not that there's never a district that doesn't have room for improvement, but we're glad we didn't find out we were way at the other end.
Correct.
Secondly, this district used to take that ad valorem property tax and refused it. And that has been recommended by the grand jury that all water districts quit taking the property tax so that the customers can see the real cost of water. Because there's some South County cities that are imported water, very expensive, and their rate looks less than ours. But if they don't take that property tax, that rate goes up 75%. And so it's nothing, there's no perfect way to show who has the lowest cost of water, but I think this was one of the ways, and I know the Register newspaper agreed with that a couple of years ago. So anyway, I want to thank you very much for your report.
Thank you very much.
That will bring us to item number 2, the Orange County Water District Activities Update. General Manager Schoenberger.
Thank you very much, President Fissler. I would like to update the board on an item that we've been engaged with for about 2 years now, which is coming to a conclusion, and coming to a conclusion very much in favor with the board and the board policies. And this, this main item, if we can go to the next slide, is on the recent annexation requests into Orange County Water District. And these requests, there were 3 agencies, Irvine Ranch, Anaheim, and Yorba Linda, requested certain additional territories to be annexed into Orange County Water District, which means that they would be able to pump more groundwater from the basin, which is good for them. They get access to the Santa Ana River, this new source of water, this huge storage, which is the groundwater basin, and a much lower cost. So that's good for the annexing agencies. The way the basin works, though, it's kind of a closed system, and any additional pumping by one agency is spread out by less pumping by all the other agencies. So there was the quandary of, this was the item. So their annexation request met all of Orange County Water District's requirements for annexing into the basin. So if you just followed their existing process, that they would be annexed in. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that this kind of resulted in a cost shift. And this is a graph here that shows this annexation that was requested and the subsequent annexation. There's really only one other major annexation left after this. So we felt that this annexation request would set the tone for the future annexation. And if you add these two together, this shows that it's about close to a $8 million cost shift in the annexing agency's favor, and then that $8 million is spread out amongst all the other users of the Orange County Water Basin. And this is not $8 million total, it's $8 million per year, so every year. So I think you were going to ask me that question.
It looks like 6 million to me.
Well, you've got 6 million for the.
I see. There's
the
another
main-
little bar.
The,
Okay.
the main recipient. And then over on the right, there's another agency. So Irvine Ranch and Yorba Linda. Anaheim's annexation was so small that they really did not benefit from this.
Okay, thank
But
you.
you'll also see from this the annual extra water costs for all the other agencies, including Mesa Water having about a $400,000 a year additional cost. So this is the concept that was brought to this board almost 2 years ago. And if we can go to the next slide, the Mesa Water Board discussed this, and you came up with a policy principle which kind of drove or gave direction to the staff in how to engage in this going forward. And that policy principle that the Mesa Water Board that you came up with is that we support these annexations as long as they're cost neutral. The Orange County Water District policy allows new territories under certain conditions to be annexed in, and we felt that should be honored, but that this basin is, since it's, feels less like this, huge unlimited resource, it is very limited, although it's a big resource. And the impacts, we felt that a cost-neutral annexation would benefit the annexing agencies through getting a new supply of water, the Santa Ana River, and access to all that storage without really harming all the other pumpers. So if we can go to the next slide, this is where our board, especially Mr. Duane, who is represented on Orange County Water District, President Fissler and I, and all the other board members, we all met with our counterparts throughout Orange County who are in the water industry and others, and tried to put forward this notion. And it was really that cost-neutral annexation policy that you came up with that really caught hold during this discussion. And it really changed the debate from should we annex or not to how can we achieve cost neutral. So I believe that Mesa Water had a very large impact on this. And ultimately, the agencies annexing and existing came to an agreement on what cost neutral was. All supported it other than one. There's one agency that didn't support it, but of the 19 agencies, 18 supported it. And it went to the Orange County Water District Board, and that was approved in a 10-0 vote. So the next slide shows some of the modifications that were made so that these agencies could become cost neutral. Anaheim, like I said, was so small it was pretty much cost neutral to start with. Yorba Linda Water District agreed to provide all of their wastewater for a guaranteed time, 50 years, to provide that to Orange County Sand District, which is now our wastewater has a value because it is recycled and it's put into the groundwater system up near Anaheim. And so guaranteeing that flow for the next 50 years had some value. Also, first, a pumper is self-limiting themselves, so they're agreeing not to pump more than 70% of their needs from the groundwater basin for a certain period of time. So those two together, plus some other concessions, got Yorba Linda to cost neutral, and then similarly on the next one, Irvine Ranch also guaranteed a certain amount of wastewater flow and agreed to limit their pumping to no more than 70% out into the future, and that brought them to cost neutral. So to go to the last slide, Orange County Board has adopted the annexation. They've certified the EIR. The time to challenge the EIR is passed, so there's no legal challenge on the CEQA. And the only last step, which I believe will be fairly administerial, is going to the LAFCO board for approval. So this is a water industry item. It really didn't get much attention outside of the water industry, but it was a very important item that had a chance of negatively impacting us by $400,000 a year. With your board's policy position and with all the work that you've done in the water industry to kind of help people see the value of a cost-neutral annexation, we were able to engage and make this happen. So this is one item which is going along as per how the board wished it to go. So that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schoenberger. Directors, any comments or questions?
Mr. President?
Director Timiaka.
I'd just like to personally thank General Manager Schoenberger. I was there to witness a lot of this. This is something that really didn't get a lot of press. It really didn't get noticed, but it's something that really could have negatively affected our water district. And kind of being the new guy up here, it was really good to see that, to see a water district and agency be proactive about this that could have negatively affected us. So him, President Fissler, Vice President Dwayne, it was really good to see that kind of behind the scenes because you don't realize that. When before I got elected, you think, oh, water, it's just a resource and you pay for it and it gets there. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and to see something like that happen because of a proactive board that's working with their general manager to save hundreds of thousands of dollars per year was really an experience for me anyways, because I didn't know about that before I got on this board. So, like I said, didn't get much press, but thank you to staff and particularly General Manager Schoenberg, because that was really impressive to see. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Vice President Dwayne.
Thanks very much, Mr. Schoenberger. Just to bring this point home here, so the $8 million a year that would have been a cost shift to the other remaining agencies had this gone through unamended. I think you said something that was a $400,000. Mesa's share of that $8 million was $400,000. Is that right?
Correct.
And so, but for the active role that the board, the district, the general manager, myself, Mr. Fissler, fellow directors played, there would be $400,000 additional expenses attributed to this district, which would translate into how much for these folks that are paying the rate.
Yeah, that of course would have been passed on to
Ratepayers. About how much? It's about 4 cents on the rate.
yeah,
Is
4 to 5 cents.
4 to 5 cents on the rate. So the role that we played in this board, our coordinating this effort among the local water community, organizing the thought process behind this, advocating on behalf at every water district in the county, at the Orange County Water District, has resulted in a policy formation that saved the water rate payers in our service area about $400,000. And to further put this in perspective, I've been seated as the board president at the Orange County Water District for a year, and this will enter my second year should they choose to reappoint me. But this issue had been discussed for a number of years. I think my recollection is something like 14 years.
Yes.
So this was a pending piece of a proposal that had been pending for 14 years. And so together, collectively, creating goodwill in the process, we successfully organized the thought process and resulted in a benefit not only to Mesa's ratepayers, but to the general water community as a whole. So thank you very much. You guys did an excellent job on this. This was I'll use a pun, watershed moment in the history of the Orange County Water District.
Thank you, Vice President Dwayne. Any other comments? I will just say that I appreciate humility, and our general manager is being very humble about this battle, because I can remember when we first joined it, and we would be going to Santa Ana and meet with their city council or Placentia or other cities, and we'd be crossing Irvine Ranch in the hall and their people. And so we were playing tug of war with 18 producers. We were trying to change an Orange County Water District policy. This was very political. Some of the board members up there did not want to face the wrath of the Irvine Ranch Water District. President Dwayne at the Orange County Water District wanted to get this as a 10-0 vote, and it was achieved. So both of you are being very humble about your accomplishments there. So thank you to both. It's a lot of money, $4 million over 10 years right there. Okay, that'll bring us to action item number 1, or action item, it's item number 3 on our agenda, proposed water rate changes public hearing. General Manager Schoenberger.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are going to have a staff presentation to start off with, and would like to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Hamilton, who is going to provide the presentation on the upcoming item on the rates. Mr. Hamilton?
Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Schoenberger. Good evening, Mr. President, other members of the board. I'm pleased to present the Mesa Water 5-year rate presentation tonight. I'd like to start with our accomplishments over the last 5 years. And what better way to start than with a picture of the recently opened Mesa Water Reliability Facility, the MRF, which provides 100% local water supply, a long-standing vision and significant accomplishment of this current board, a long-standing vision of several boards of directors. So we've listed a few slides here of achievements over the last 5 years. First slide contains the board's goals. We're 100% locally reliable, received a strong AAA rating, meeting the board's financial goals. Onto this slide, this contains the awards and transparencies. Mesa Water won several significant awards related to the MRF, transparency, and financial reporting. Now, as we transition to achievements as Mesa Water being a leader in regional issues, they relate to in cost-neutral annexation, in changing grant regulations, and increasing Mesa Water's groundwater pumping to 75%. Lastly is the achievements in efficiency. There have been several significant achievements, namely low water losses and leaks, meeting California's mandated conservation in 2020 already, and operational efficiency, which segues us to this next slide, which may be a little familiar. You can see Mesa Water is one of the most efficient water districts in Orange County by measure of per capita expenditures. And as we transition to proposed water rates, you can see there is a reliable water supply. When customers turn their faucet on, they expect water to come out, and it does. And when using it, it's high quality water. It also, this rate structure over the next 5 years funds infrastructure enhancements and allows Mesa Water to achieve and operate at the lowest long-term cost. Some benefits include funding our $35 million capital improvement program, achieving better credit ratings, improving and enhancing the district's financial health, providing funds to better respond to catastrophes, and enhancing the Mesa Water's ability to borrow additional funds as needed. So you might ask, why 5 years at once? Well, it decreases variability for both our customers and the district. It allows for better forecasting and planning for Mesa Water. And lastly, it saves close to $50,000 over the next 5 years when compared annually, just as it compares to hard costs to mail those Prop 218 notices out. So we're going to transition to a section of the presentation that contains charts. This graph represents potable water rates. As you can see, there's a vertical line that separates the left side, historic, with the right side, projected water rates. This slide details the most common residential water rate for potable water and shows a 12-cent increase per unit in fiscal year 15. The weighted average water rate increased for all water types at 11 cents per unit in fiscal year 15. So moving to the next, as you can see on this slide, it shows the proposed water rates along with historic and projected, and that is in the blue line, the weighted average, along with the green line, we're representing the days cash ratio. This is Mesa Water's financial health. You stay on the left side and look at that for a bit. The Mesa Water required higher rate increases historically, the blue line. Let me start over. The required rate increases on the blue line, historically, you can see those being at a higher level when compared to they were required to raise or improve the financial health, the green line. Now you cross the vertical line in the middle, that coincidentally, where those two lines cross, this represents a new era, where as the district's financial health improves on the green line, you can see lower water rate increases are necessary. This next slide compares inflation in green to the water rate increases in blue. Again, staying on the left side of the vertical line, you can see a large difference between the historical higher rate increases, blue line, and inflation in the green. Now, if you move to the right, you can see this gap narrowing between water rate increases, inflation over the next 5 years. So this last historic versus projected slide in this section shows lower average monthly increases in the future. And just to reiterate, these monthly increases represent a one-time increase in the average monthly invoice from one fiscal year to another. So you might ask, where does this money go over the next 5 years? This slide totals the total amount spent over the next 5 years by expenditure category. So you can see in the lower right, operating expenses, that takes a 65% share of all expenditures over the next 5 years, along with capital expenditures being the next largest at 19%. So between those two categories, nearly 85% of all funds expended over the next 5 years go to those two categories. Similar to the last slide, this slide is broken out by year with the same categories. So if you start at the red, orange, at the lowest part of the graph, you can see the operating expenses increase each year. The next bar, green, shows our flat debt service. No increases there. The following bar, which is purple, shows capital expenditures increasing, especially in those latter years. Lastly, the blue line at top, the blue bars, show reduced reserve funding, which lowers proposed water rates needed over the next 5 years. To summarize, both of these last two schedules, the vast majority of the proposed rate increase is going to offset increased operating expenses and capital expenditures. So how did we get here? There were Prop 218 notices mailed in advance. We provided various ways for people to comment. Ads were placed in newspapers, notices posted throughout the district, and to date, 40 letters of protest have been received. So we transition now to the financial forecast section. There are various 3 pages here that have the assumptions. Small growth in demand, 75% pumping percentage in fiscal year 17, along with no imported water. Some significant expense assumptions include the OCWD rates that they've produced and projected, and along with some varying 2.5% to 5% increase in water and production costs. As we've mentioned, $35 million in capital expenditures, and the revenue assumptions of meter charges matching the same rate percentage increase is water rates and minimal investment earnings percentage. So similar to the previous slides, you'll see a vertical line down the middle. You'll see the historic on the left, projected on the right. This graph, this slide shows the cash on hand. Historically, we've met the board's goals and will continue meeting them in the future. The blue arrow represents the first year of the proposed rate structure. This will be consistent through the slides in this section. And the graph tapers to approximately $40 million in fiscal year 19. This next slide shows days cash ratio, the financial health of the district. Again, Mesa Water has historically met the board's goals and will meet them in the future. The blue arrow again represents the first year of the proposed rate structure. And this graph tapers to approximately 600 days in fiscal year 19. Next, we have the designated funds comparison. This is an interesting article and graph that the Orange County Register recently published, calculating the percent of reserves for Orange County water and wastewater districts. You can see there's two arrows. The first is the green that represents our average of all water and wastewater districts, and it shows that there is 128%, districts maintain about, on average, 128% of their annual spend. If you go to the left, approximately 3 bars, you'll see Mesa Water. Mesa Water is only at 80% of the annual spend as a percentage of reserves. This means we have, on average, almost 40% less designated funds than the average water and wastewater districts in Orange County. Going on to operating revenue, you can see the projections along with the historic amounts. And just one item to note is that 100% of our rates and fees are funded by our customers. There's no property tax, as was previously mentioned. Next is operating expenses. You can see a rise in the historic, but then there's a little dip in fiscal year 2014, and that is due to us recently lowering our budgeted operating expenses in fiscal year 14 by 6%, reflecting the efficiencies achieved recently. This next slide shows the 5-year capital program. There are 4 capital project categories. In total, you can see the amounts spent overall that make up that $35 million, the largest being well improvements and traditional repair and replacements. This slide contains the same data, only segregated by year, so you can see how the spend occurs by year. So this slide shows projected pipe replacements based on an outside consulting and engineering firm, their study on each pipe's useful life and the estimated funds and time frame to replace this infrastructure. However, we're not replacing pipes until necessary. This graph shows the following amounts necessary for pipe replacement. On the left top section, you can see over the next 30 years, approximately $500 million or $500 million in future costs are necessary based on this study. And over the 100-year period, there's $1.5 billion in future costs required. Also thought I'd mention there's large slides at the entry to this room that show those details also. This next slide shows the debt service. So you can see it's fairly level. There's 5 different loans that the district has, and the debt service rolls off in 2026. The level's just a little bit shy of $3.5 million a year. So to conclude, the proposed water rates meet the board's goals over the next 5 years. They cover projected expenditure increases and provide both Mesa Water and its customers with improved financial health. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Directors, any questions for Vice President Dwayne?
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. As usual, an excellent presentation. Can you tell us about your credentials, sir?
Sure. I have over 20 years of accounting experience. I was a CPA, gained my CPA credential in, I think, approximately 18 years ago. I have consulting experience, progressive accounting experience, have worked for at least 2 other water districts in either in consulting or full-time employee. I'm the district treasurer here and the chief financial officer.
Very good. And as a certified public accountant, that title and license holds you to a high standard, I believe. Is that correct?
It does.
And that high standard includes more than just the letter of the law. It includes the spirit and intent of something called the generally accepted accounting principles. Is that right?
That is correct.
So you've now been at the district for some time and had an opportunity to observe this. And just in your professional opinion, is this a well-run, organization from a financial perspective? You've had many years of observing other companies in an accounting perspective, and your point of view would be important in that regard.
Yes.
Okay. So in your presentation, I saw a slide here towards the back, your slide number 32. And so if I just want to drive the point home here, in the next 5 years, our capital program, that would be stuff like replacing fire hydrants and valves and pipes in the street and stuff like that, right?
Correct.
And so what the board and the engineers and the scientists are recommending to the board is that we are proposing to increase the water rate to help pay for that $35 million of capital structure that will have to be improved or replaced. Is that the idea?
Exactly.
So that's the purpose of the rate hike today. So when we replace these these pipes and things, I'm going to ask the general manager to help out on this, and maybe our chief engineer. Yes.
I think maybe before we get too deep into discussion, I thought maybe you might have a quick question. I want to just make a couple announcements, if that's all right,
Okay.
before we go to more discussion.
Certainly,
Are you a good stopping point?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Just want to announce that this is the time and place for a public hearing for the purpose of receiving comments on the proposed revisions to Mesa Water District water rates. And there will be 2 opportunities tonight for the board's discussion. We will soon go into some discussion, then we'll have some public comments, and then we'll have more discussion. So, Mr. Schoenberger?
Yes.
As a matter of record, I would like to ask you, has the notice of the public hearing been published?
Yes, notices were mailed to customers in compliance with state law and Mesa Water's adopted policy. Notices were posted at our offices on the website, at the post office on Adams Avenue, and at Costa Mesa City Hall. A paid ad was published in the Daily Pilot on November 28th and December 25th. In addition to that, there were other activities to inform ratepayers about the public hearing and proposed water rate charges. We had several meetings, including town halls at the Mesa Water Reliability Facility between Mesa board members, staff, and over 50 ratepayers. We replied to ratepayers' phone calls and emails with more information about the proposed water rate change and how to participate in the public hearing. Mesa Water posted frequently asked questions on our website, and we also distributed a press release which is also posted on our website, and the press release resulted in items being run by the Daily Pilot and the Orange County Register.
Thank you, Mr. Schoenberger. I think I've been asked by a member of the board that we take a very quick break. Is that correct? Yeah. So I apologize. We'll take about a 3-minute break here, and then we will come back and open the floor to discussion by the board. Thank you. All right, we will reconvene the board meeting. Okay, we just finished with the listing of our postings and our Prop 218 mailings. So I'm going to open this up to discussion by the board, and I will go back to Vice President Dwayne. I'm sorry I may have interrupted your stream of thought before, but
That's okay. Mr. Hamilton, where is he? Mr. Hamilton's not off the hook yet. That's okay.
There he comes.
Welcome back, Mr. Hamilton. So we just left off, there was about $35 million worth of infrastructure repair and replacement that'll be done in the next 5 years. So when we repair this and replace this infrastructure, of course, it's not just, a pipe. We have to dig up a street, and then we have to patch and replace the street. And who pays for the street when we have to dig up the pipe?
Yeah, that is all, those are all costs that are borne by the Mesa Water.
So the city has been nice enough in the last year to pave all of our streets around the city, and we have a coordinated effort with the city to make sure that we're not digging up the streets immediately after they pave them. So the systems master plan that we have considers, and we work with those folks to make sure that we're not making redundant work in multiple government agencies. Am I right on that idea?
Yes, we've done a good job in coordinating and keeping ahead of the streets, of the city's street paving program.
Because otherwise the ratepayer would pay more for us and get poorer quality roads in the process.
Correct.
And then also, Mr. Hamilton mentioned that we have a tight system, referring to the fact that the system doesn't leak very much, and or very little, if at all. And I think that we're on path to be considered what's called a world-class. Or what is that story again?
A world-class, right now we're in the excellent category. There are very few agencies who are world-class, but what that is it's really a very broad measure of how well maintained your system is, and that can be measured on a very broad scale by how leaky is your system. Not only do you is it a measure of that, it's also a measure of how much water you're losing that you've already pumped and treated and put into the system.
So maintaining the system obviously creates a tight system that doesn't leak very much, but if we didn't do that, if we deferred maintenance on the system, who would pay for the water that's leaking into the ground?
Yeah, so that would be a cost to the district, because we pay for every acre foot we pump, and then we treat it and pressurize it. And those costs are spread out amongst all the users of Mesa Water.
So the ratepayer would pay a higher cost for leaking pipes that have not been properly maintained, and nobody would probably actually be the wiser, because nobody's going to dig deep enough into the records to understand that. But ours is called a world-class status, or a excellent status, and we're going to world-class. And who tells us this? Is it some pie-in-the-sky kind of idea, or is this an objective third party?
Yeah, there's the American Water Works Association has a water leaks committee, and they have some actually extremely rigorous criteria by which you can bring in a third-party expert to come in and run your district through that criteria to see where you end up.
So in support of maintaining the system, we collect a portion of the rate for into what we call designated funds. And how many designated funds do we have?
I believe we have 7.
7, and one of those is for infrastructure repair and replacement, right?
Correct.
And so a fraction of a cent goes into these designated funds, and it helps pay for the ongoing maintenance, operation, and upgrade of the system. Is that the idea?
Correct. We have our capital improvement program, and then we have our designated fund, which we will pull out of also, yes.
Okay, and so we had a slide up there a few minutes ago that shows, I think Mr. Hamilton's quote was about $1.5 billion in total infrastructure replacements over how many years? Approximately 100 years. So the 100-year look is that a reasonable look out for an agency like this to consider how, that the facilities themselves in a 100-year time frame will need to be replaced?
I believe so. I probably would defer to an engineer to answer that question.
We have a couple of guys and their engineers in the audience, I think.
I'll take that. It is good to look out that far, but we really act on our 5-year CIP, and then many agencies also look at a 30-year window. So we do the 5-year the 30-year, and the 100-year look.
Okay, and so the 5-year we've already identified is about $35 million, and then it looks to me like not too far after that, there's kind of a big hump in the camel's back on that graph. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
So that first big line that reaches all the way to the top, yes, that's about 20 or 30 years out, it looks like. But that hump, are we going to be able to replace all of those pipes at the same time within that short time frame there? It looks like about 10 years, and there's probably a whole lot of the system that would have to be dug up all at the same time to get that done. Is that?
Yeah, that's that first 10-year chunk that you see sticking up there. That's probably about $200 million worth of expenditures. So that's a really tough nut to crack. So there will have to be additional discussions about reserve levels or going in debt. And then also there will be a very sharp look at whether those pipes need replacing at that time or whether it can be deferred depending upon the condition.
And how do you make that determination?
One thing you look at is the number of leaks you've had. You can do, testing. There's various ways of determining the condition of your system.
So we'll do a system assessment, determine which pipes need to be replaced, and then in all likelihood, I'm guessing that some of that infrastructure repair will have to be moved in closer so that we can do this in an orderly way instead of digging up half of the city at the same time. We'll have to move some of this in, move some of it out, figure out which are most vulnerable, and then do a system assessment. But my final question is, so $200 million worth of infrastructure repair, replacement, and improvement. The district obviously doesn't have that much cash on hand. So where are we going to get the money?
That's the question, and there's, you either get it that year from the ratepayer, which is called PAYGO, or you go into bonded indebtedness, which spreads it out over time.
And that bond or the PAYGO, we would charge all the folks who live here today, but that would violate the fairness principle of the intergenerational sharing of the expense over the life, as the previous gentleman testified to. Is that the idea?
Correct.
So in all likelihood, we're going to have to enter the capital markets to spread the cost of this $200 million. What's the cheapest way to reach into the capital markets to finance this kind of construction?
For us going certificates of participation, and of course, if an agency has a AAA credit rating, you get the lowest cost of credit.
I wrote a letter, hopefully that'll be published soon, testifying about the WIFIA Act in front of the United States Congress, and the American Water Works Association helped me in drafting the letter. And one of the things we discussed was the cost of financing. And what's quoted in the article that will be published is that a 2% reduction in the interest rate associated with capital infrastructure repair, replacement, and improvement reduces your project cost by a total of 25% over the life of that project. So a very small incremental difference in the cost of financing makes a tremendous difference in the amount of cost that is incurred by the ratepayer. So our objective on this board, I've sat here for 10 years, has been to, and I continue to believe that it is, to provide water to the consumer at the lowest possible cost. Would you say, Mr. Schoenberger, that having a AAA credit rating and entering the capital markets with that AAA credit rating is consistent with the objective of providing the lowest cost water to the consumer?
Yes, it is.
Have you ever built any infrastructure?
Yes.
How many dollars? Billions, hundreds of billions?
Not hundreds of billions. Just what I've designed and overseen the construction of, probably $500 million worth of capital improvements in my career.
And so is everything I've suggested here consistent with what your belief as a professional engineer and Mr. Hamilton's idea as a professional finance expert and all of the other experts that have testified over the last 600 board meetings for the last 5 years that I've participated in, these other gentlemen have participated in, as we've considered this long-term facilities plan and the long-term financial plan married to it on how best to serve the water to the customer at the lowest possible cost? Is everything we've talked about here consistent with all of those 600 board meetings?
Yes, and the board has deliberated this issue over many years and has our strategic plan, our long-range financial plan, and that has been a consistent theme of all those discussions and I believe those decisions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice President Dwayne. Questions?
Just comments.
Director
Question.
Bachmann.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate hearing from Vice President Dwayne, words that warm my own heart on this. As most people know, I've been a consistent advocate since the first day on the board of being the orderly replacement of capital facilities, as I call it, and the perpetual agency model, that there will always be people here. If there aren't, well, then we don't have to worry about it. But if there are people here, they're going to need water. And if they need water, it needs to get here somehow. That somehow is by pipes. It's not by magic. And pipes require cost. And one method is to enter the capital markets and borrow, which does spread the cost over the years after the borrowing. Meanwhile, another way to augment that is also creates transgenerational fairness is for those of us using the pipes that are here today to pay a portion of that's proportionate to our use of the pipe. So if we live here for 30 years and the pipe lasts 100 years, then we should pay 30% of the value of that pipe because that's what we used. And when you really come down to it, the district has assets because it's an accounting fiction, so to speak. The district has assets. There are pipes in the ground, but we're not going to sell them. In effect, what they are is a permanent cost. You can all boil it down. And when it comes right down to it, we have so many dollars of infrastructure when you boil it right down that ultimately each year, every inch of pipe that we have can be boiled down to a certain dollar cost per year per foot of pipe maintained. And that is, every study I've ever read shows that the lowest possible cost is to finance it over the maximum possible period of time. And that way to achieve that is by saving for the long term. Because the board at Mesa Water didn't begin saving in 1960 for the replacement of the pipes today, 50 years later, halfway through their life, we would be halfway through the life of the 100-year pipes. They didn't begin saving, so we started a little late, but at least we're starting. And so we're going to have to borrow, I'm sure of that, at some point in the future. But I also believe that by having prudent capital policies now, which was more part of what I see where this rate increase is going and where the board has been going for the last many years, to get to align the optimal capital structure, the optimal financial structure, the optimal staffing structure to ensure that we had this. This looks like we're heading in the right direction, and I'm glad that we're talking about it. So many agencies don't, and they simply fail to plan and therefore plan to fail. So I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director Bachmann. Director Timianka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am the newest board member here. I've been here 1 year and 1 day today, and I've learned a lot over the last year. So when I ran for the seat, just to give you an overview, I knocked on about 2,200 doors, talked to about 1,000 residents, and every time I talked to someone, I told them, when I make decisions, I'm going to make them with 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. That's going to be my mindset. I'm going to be living here a long time. Obviously, I'm younger. But too many times we see in local government, cities around the country, Detroit, Stockton, they're running into trouble. They're cash strapped. They don't have money for infrastructure repairs, and they didn't plan for the future. And one thing that I've really been in awe of being on this board and working with our staff is the long-term financial plan that they've put in place here. And so what I've come to learn here is that we are one of the best water districts in not only Orange County, but in the country. We reduced our budget by 6% this year. We're on the right track. Everything we've seen today corroborates that. We're not here today on some whim to make ends meet and try to get a bunch of cash right now to fill up a hole. We're here because this is a 5-year plan, which really is a 30-year plan when it comes to infrastructure, because we're looking down the road. And like I said, I'm going to be living here a long time, and I want to make sure that 20 years down the road, when these infrastructure, these pipeline replacements come up, we're not out of cash. We don't have a really bad bond rating, and suddenly we need to go into debt with a really high rate. But we'll be prepared for that. We'll have a lot of cash in the bank because we'll need it, and we'll have a AAA rating, which we already do, and this is part of that plan. So, one of the other things we've mentioned too is we're 100% local here. That means we're drought free. Think about that, drought free. We mention it and it seems casual, but that's exceptional. There's no other water district in Southern California that can say that. Certainly Orange County, maybe somewhere else in Southern California I don't know about, but that's exceptional. And people wash over that. They say, oh, yeah, they're 100% local. That's great. That's exceptional. So, when you think about that, we're prepared. We have a 500-year supply of water. We have, the lowest efficient, the most efficient, the lowest expenditure per capita in all of Orange County, as you've seen. And so that's something to always keep in mind, because people don't think about that when they go to buy a house, or when they want to start a family, or look where they're going to live for 20 years. So that's something to really be proud of, and the people who are in the audience here who live in our district, that's something for you to be proud of too. So today we're proposing a rate. It's roughly $2 a month. $2 a month. Now, not to limit that and not to say people aren't having hard times, they are. But the five of us are ratepayers also. So believe me, we've taken that into account. We've deliberated over this for months and months. This is not something we easily do, and we just readily say, okay, let's vote on it and move forward. This is something we've given a lot of thought. We've had dozens and dozens of public meetings talking about this. We've gotten exceptional data from several third-party outside sources that have given us great direction in this decision we have to make today. And one thing to keep in mind, though, we're a water district. Our costs go up just like yours do at home. We have labor costs, electricity costs, our replenishment assessment from Orange County Water District. They're constantly going up, just like anything else, inflation as well. Yet our budget still went down 6%, is going down 6% this next year. So while our costs are going up more than this proposed rate increase, we're actually proposing to raise the rate even less than our costs are going up. That's also exceptional, because we're not passing on the true increase in cost that we're seeing to our ratepayers. We're passing on less of that and still putting money away for reserves and being prepared for 20 years down the road and 30 years down the road. So, just like, the public here today and the ratepayers at home, we have to put money away for pipes. People at home, they have their kids at college or retirement they have to put money away for. We have to do that too, because we are thinking long term here. Now, we could easily sit up here and say, hey, we're elected officials. Let's vote to lower the rate, or vote against this today. And believe me, we would have a lot of friends. People would love us. They'd say, hey, good job. We kept our rates low. And you know what? In 20 years, we would be up the creek without a paddle. So we're thinking long term here. This is not an easy decision for any of us. But I think you've seen today what an exceptional water district we are, and I think you can kind of see where I stand on this issue. But I think I'm very proud, of the board up here, the position we've taken. I've only been here a year, but I've been nothing but impressed by our staff, by the board, and so I just want to show my support for this. Not that I like raising rates. This is certainly something that I don't want to do, and never thought I would support. But after seeing everything, all the diligence that our staff and our board has had in the long-term plan that we are creating here, I am. So with that, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, staff.
Thank you, Director Timiaka. Andrew, I'd like to ask you a couple questions myself. Let's go to slide 14. And that is the proposed water rates increases. And I see where it goes in 2015, proposed 3.5, then 3.5, and then it starts trailing down. Now, I understand that this board did, the 7-year long-range financial plan in 2010, where you saw everything on the left-hand side of the chart. So we did 5 years of the 7-year long-range plan. So the first 2 years here on the right side of that axis have dipped quite a bit, though, from that 5% down to 3.5. I mean, that's quite a percentage decrease, like 30% or something. The board has a rate stabilization reserve fund. Did this board take any money from that rate stabilization reserve fund to make these 3.5s not be 5s or something else? Did we borrow money from that?
Yes, I think it was approximately $300,000.
Okay. So that was about 3 cents on the rate. These rates are about 3 cents less at the beginning than they would have been if we hadn't used our reserve funds. And then the last 3 years, where it's 2.7, 2.6, 2.7, they could have been lower on one of our models. They could have been 2.5s, but what we're doing is backfilling the reserves we took, correct? In the last 3 years that we transferred, the $300,000 or $400,000. So what we tried to do is smooth the rate increase for the customers, is my point on this slide. We did use our reserve funds for that. I'm asking you a question I already knew the answer to, but I just wanted to get that out there. On slide 17, we're looking at increase of reserves of 7% of the total 15% increase. So if you do math the correct way, I did it incorrect at first a couple days ago, you'll find that of that 11, you'll find that of the 15% total rate increase, 14 of the 15% is for debt service, capital expenditures, and operating, and 1% of the rate increase is for reserves. Would you agree with that? I'm putting you on the spot, but there is some multiplication involved. So,
Yeah, this slide shows the total expenditures over the next 5 years. So
correct.
of the rate increase, I don't know if you could multiply the but I think you're in the right.
Yeah,
Train of thought.
I have done the math, and what it is, and it's hard to phrase. This is 7% of the total rate increase in dollars. And if you say, well, it's 7% of the 15, that looks like half of the 15. What it is, it's 1% of the total of 15% rate. So even if some people object to reserves I've talked to, the rate increase, instead of being 15%, basically could be 14% and then not reach our financial goals, days cash on hand. And the reason I bring that up is operating capital expenditures on the left of $35 million. $6 million of that is for pipes that have gone beyond or will go beyond by 2019. That's that have gone beyond their life expectancy, and from the Corolla report. So we're doing $6 million of pipes, and then we are doing, you do have a slide that shows where it all goes, but my point is this: if we raise these rates in order to fund these $35 million in capital improvement projects, this board has a duty and will fulfill that duty to make sure that these projects get done. And I want the public to know that these projects are not some beautifying projects. It's not like a homeowner redoing the bathrooms, putting granite in the kitchen. It's like a homeowner doing termite repair or repairing the foundation. This is just to stay where we're at, is for what this rate increase is for. And, you know, where we're at is good. You know, we're the lowest expenditures per capita water district in Orange County. We have the AAA bond rating. We fully funded our pensions, while many other governments are broke and have millions of dollars of pension liability. Slide 28. You show where we are in our total reserve levels, with the arrow on the left, the blue arrow, and then the green arrow is the average. I noticed that our Costa Mesa Sanitary District is about 4 bars over. They're at 1.78 years of cash on hand of operating expenses. We're trying to get to 1.75. So we're trying to get in the next 5 years to where the sanitary district is today, correct?
Yes, approximately 600 days.
Yes. Okay, so we will be on par with another special district in the city of Costa Mesa. On slide 31, the pipeline R&R is the $6 million I was talking about, and as you can see then in slide 32, a big piece of that pipe is in 2019, the green, as designated by the green. Now getting to the scary slide, slide 33. this 5 years doesn't have a lot to do with this 5-year rate increase because there's not a lot of pipe replacements. But what it is the story about our district. It's telling us what to expect going forward. And if we can create through our strategic plan back here a vision about our future, as a board, we can shape that future. And if we don't have this vision, then we're basically going to be a public agency that's just going to be reactive and going from crisis to crisis. And so that's what I admire about this board before I got here and since we've been here, is we're not reactive, we're proactive. And, you know, I want to say that the EPA recently made a statement that we're in the era of replacement of capital infrastructure for cities that are 50 years or older. And Costa Mesa is 60 years old. And they said it's going to hit ratepayers' wallets very hard. And as you can see by that graph, the ratepayer's wallet is going to get hit very hard. It's not our fault up here. It's nobody's fault. Pipes get old. We all get old. Ethan's young, so he'll be around here for some of these pipes. But he will get old. He'll be there, that big. And what we're doing, we're not at fault for our pipes getting old. But we will be at fault if we don't plan for it and we don't have this vision and we go from crisis to crisis. So thank you for your presentation. If there's no more director comments, I'm going to open this up for public comments. I do have 2 speaker cards, Ron Ambergy, and then followed by Phil Morello. And then anyone else who wants to speak after that, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
5 minutes each.
5 minutes each, not 5 minutes total.
President Fissler, members of the board, I just wanted to start out by saying you guys are doing a great job. I can tell you've done a lot of work on this. And I know a lot of you guys, many of you guys personally, I have a lot of respect for you on a personal level and just the work that I've noticed over the last few months. But having said that, I mean, I don't want you to take anything I say as I'm going against anybody's character, but it's just thoughts that I have. I want to start out by apologizing for not being more involved in this. I know this is like the 6th meeting of a series. You had town hall meetings and all this. A lot of us in the community have been tied up with other things, and myself, I've been more concerned with city situations, and I'm on a couple committees, so I wanted to start out with that. But I don't know that much. I'm learning a lot the more I come to these meetings, but a lot of good information. But I probably know twice as much as the average citizen out there, because most people don't really have a clue. And like you say, it's only $2, so people, it's only $2. But we had a 5-year plan, it raised it 25%, and then another 5-year plan we're going to vote on, and it's another 15%. So that's, I'm assuming the 15 on top of the 25, so it's close to a 50% overall increase in 10 years. And I mean, some of us are skeptical, let's put it that way, of government or government agencies, and maybe you guys don't see yourself as that, but I think that's, you have the power to raise fees or taxes or whatever. When I look at that chart you have up there, the 100-year plan. I mean, who could do a 100-year plan? That's just, I mean, you could say almost anything, couldn't you? And who's going to go back 50 years from now and tell you got it wrong? But you can see the first 20 years, the last 20 years, we haven't done anything, virtually nothing. So the first question is why? I mean, why couldn't we flatten that steep curve out a little bit? And I know we do projections and things, and like you set marks of 100 years. I mean, all of a sudden a pipe is going to start leaking at 100 years. I mean, who knows? You guys are sitting on a commodity that people have to have. We don't have any other choice. So you could raise fees anytime, raise rates anytime you want, if it's needed. And I sit on the charter committee, we're going through the charter. Last night, we talked about reserves, and you guys are talking about a 600-day reserve. I mean, we're looking at a 50% reserve, so that'd be a half a year reserve. And that's our target. I mean, we're nowhere near that in the city, at the city level. So I'm trying to compute that, how that makes sense. I know you said the district, the sanitation district has 1.75 years of reserve. It just seems excessive to me. I don't see why you need that much. And that's taking, like Mr. Dwayne said, there's a line there where you're taking money from this generation, and we should be paying for a certain percentage of that, but where is that line? It seems like we're going over that. That's just my uneducated opinion. And like I said, I need to learn a lot more. And I plan on learning a lot more. I don't know if you guys know, I'm planning on running for the board next November. So I plan to be around, because I think this is an important issue. And I don't know, I don't have much more to say. I think, at this late stage, you guys, you know how you feel. You know how you're going to vote. But just think of the people out there. I mean, for me, it's not that big a deal. The other day, I looked at my bill, it was $150, and I was shocked. I mean, last time I looked at it, it was $40. Now, it's been a while. I don't pay the bill, my wife does, but it just seems like it's gone up quite a bit. So there's a lot of people out there on fixed incomes, older people or whatever, that this increase means a lot more to them. Comes right out of their, pension or Social Security or whatever. So just give that some thought. So thanks for the time.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comments. Appreciate you taking the time to come down. Phil Morello.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
Boy, I wish I could be as nice as Ron Ambergy. Same here. It's not personal. I know most of you guys. I've spoken to every single one of you in the past. Some of you have been to my house a number of times. The scary slide is kind of scaring me. Could you get rid of that, please?
Certainly. You have a favorite slide?
It's the one thing I think is, I wouldn't even be here today because I think most of the stuff you're doing is probably correct. I like to see the lines moved out a little bit, and I like to see the assumptions changed. Okay? The scary slide is based on engineering assumptions. I'm an engineer. I know how it works. I looked at your assumptions. The assumptions are conservative. You could easily move that out, and I think Mr. Schellenberger alluded to that. He said that tall line there is going to have to get ameliorated somehow. I don't know what he means, but that means basically you're changing the assumptions the line was drawn upon. So I think you need to do that for your whole plan. Assumptions have to be looked at. I've just got a bunch of scribbled notes here, so it's not going to sound coherent in terms of connection, but one thing that was really missing from all the presentations was the comparison to our present economy. I mean, you guys aren't the water board. I mean, you're the water board, but you don't represent the actual district. You represent the ratepayers, okay? Every time you look at a decision, it has to be balanced against what's happening to the ratepayers. Now, I don't know what your conception of Costa Mesa is, but, this city is a dichotomy, okay? Most of you guys live in really nice houses. Some of you are millionaires. But the west side that we had to go through here, a lot of people are not. These little tiny incremental rate increases mean something to those people. Fact is, I think that if you looked at what you're doing against the economy, you'd say, well, maybe we could push this out a little bit or delay something or change our assumptions. And that's what I'm here to ask you to do. As Mr. Ambergy said, the rate of inflation, and I know because my mother-in-law's been living with us for 6 months, who's 86 years old, has been getting her Social Security checks. Her check went up 1.5% because that's a federal rate of inflation. Now, the numbers that Mr. Ambergy said were close, but they weren't exact. My numbers aren't exact either, but they're a little closer than what he said. The last time you raised rates, the published rate of increase was 26.5%. The actual meter rate increase was about 28%. That's guesstimate on my part because I haven't gone back the previous 5 years. I'm guesstimating that because the quoted rate increase was 15.6%, but by your published documentation, the meter rate is 17.25%. And you can add it up yourself. As a matter of fact, Colleen sent that to me today. So if you add those two together, you're going to get 43.75%, if I can still add. That spread over 10 years, that's 4.375% a year averaged, the current rate of inflation. What happens to be, what is 3 times 1.5? No calculators, please.
4.5.
4.5, yes. And so you have a rate of 4.3, which is close to 4.5, which means you're 3 times the average rate of inflation. For a city like this, that's a meaningful amount. Your fixed cost, if you can't get your fixed cost in line with the rate of inflation, and I've talked to most of you guys before, and you guys quote me 2 things every time. We have to raise rates because of infrastructure and inflation. Lie. If inflation is 1.5%, you're way over that. Infrastructure, your assumptions can be changed. The thing I'd like to see you do is maybe raise the rates 2% per year. I don't know if it should be 5 years, but at least in the initial economy, a couple of years, maybe 2%. Then if you want to go off on your conservative trajectory, that's fine with me. But I think it should be until the economy recovers. I would suggest that you vote no on this today, go back to the drawing board, come back with another plan. 2% seems reasonable to me in a 1.5% inflation era. You know, I don't want to be insensitive to you guys. I think you guys are great. Every one of you are really smart. You're doing a terrific job here. And you work in the communities. You all have done many, many things for our community, as have I. I've been active for 30 years in this community. Again, this is not Newport Beach. We are not in this business to win awards. The assumptions that are made against other districts is, to me, it's almost absurd. Okay? We do not need a world-class water system. It's nice to have, at least not in this economy, okay?
Mr. Morello?
Yeah.
Do you know about how much more time you would like?
I only made like 3 points here, and I have about 15, so.
Because we've done
sum it up for a
we've
minute.
done the 5 minutes. I have no objection to giving you 5 more minutes if the board doesn't, but after that, 10 minutes I would like to be wrapped up.
That'd be nice. You could do it.
Continue.
Thank you. Okay, I was talking about the metrics that you're using. I think the metrics that were presented today are probably the weakest metrics you could have. We need to know what your cost of goods are, and I think it's hidden in the document. It's hidden there. But really, you need to compare yourself against yourself, not against other water districts. You need to know what your efficiency is compared to a typical business model, not other districts. Mr. Temiakin pointed out a good point where the volume of water is different, so the chart really meant absolutely nothing because the rates differ per usage amount. So that was exactly my thought when it was being presented. I've seen some of the other charts too, and some of them just, I don't know, they don't make sense to me. Okay, Mr. Fissler, I don't mean to be rude or insultive, but you said you're doing these increase is to just stay where you are, to keep the current level of pipes or whatever, but actually it seems like the goal is a world-class water system. And so I think you're really moving in that direction. So again, that speaks to the assumptions that are being made. Again, we are in the lowest interest rate period for bonds in the history of the United States. The United States of America, okay, you guys are financial guys. What's the rating? What's the Standard & Poor's rating of the United States of America? It's AA+. What is our goal? AAA. Our goal is higher than the United States of America. I just don't see the need for it. I can understand you're going to save a few $1 million, but you don't need to do it now. I could see it, you move it out a little bit, that would be fine. In the last 5 years, you've saved $1 million in interest expenses. It costs the ratepayers, now my memory's failing a little bit here, I calculated it before, I believe it costs us about $6 to $7 million to help you guys get the $1 million in savings. I agree with lowering the interest rates. I've refinanced my house, but I can afford to do it. The fact is, the people that are paying your rates cannot necessarily afford to do it. Some of us can, some cannot. Last time I came here and talked, I was besmirched because, people thought I was complaining about me paying my own rates. I can afford to pay the rates. I'm speaking on behalf of the other people that cannot. I guess I'll just end it with that. I had a question on whether you guys were subject to the Brown Act. That's the only other thing I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mello, for taking the time to write down all those comments. Are there any other members of the public that wish to address the board on this item? Well, if there's no more comments by the public, then I'm going to declare the public comments segment closed. Mr. Schoenberger, would you please report to the board about any protests to the proposed revisions of Mesa's water rates that we have received?
Yes, Mr. President, as of 5 p.m. today, the district received 40 official written protests prior to the hearing, and I would like to ask the district secretary if there have been additional ones that have come since then.
We have received one more.
So 41 official protests. In addition, we received 4 letters that asked that we relate to the board their thoughts. So in addition to the 41 official written protests, we have another 4 letters. 3 of those letters were letters of support for the rate increase, and one of those letters from a Mr. Tom Pollitt requested that we delay the vote on this issue. The number of protests that we have received does not equal a majority of property owners within Mesa Water's service area.
Thank you. So we actually received this year 3 letters of support.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. There's 5 directors here. Which 2 didn't write the? I'm just kidding. None of the letters were from the directors, I assume. No.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm going to open the floor to discussion by the board. Directors, any comments?
Mr. President, if I could.
Director Bachmiller.
Thank you. So, having heard the public comments, I thought there were some interesting points. One of them is, and this comes up in a number of the letter of protest as well, and it is something of concern. We all have or have had, if they've passed on, aged parents, some of whom live on fixed incomes, and some of whom are responsible for water bills as well as potentially other utility bills. One of the things that I've asked our general manager and board president to agendize is because the law, and I believe our attorney is prepared to answer this question if necessary, because the law prohibits Mesa Water from having different rates for different economic classes of people, we cannot provide discounts to people based on their income. However, there's nothing that I know of that would prohibit the district from sponsoring or creating a small charity to which people could voluntarily contribute funds to help people pay their bills if they become excessive, and we could even have it staffed. And I've asked our general manager and our board president to agendize this idea, which I won't go into detail at this time, for future discussion at a Mesa Water Finance Committee meeting. I think that will help serve our public well in the idea that something like what the gas company does with their voluntary contribution program. I think looking at assumptions is always a good thing. What are our assumptions? What do we have that we go into these models? And our staff, there's sensitivity models, and one thing that's consistent that we found out in infrastructure issues, as well as natural disasters such as earthquakes that we're subject to, or hurricanes that we're not subject to, except only very, very rarely, that the most conservative assumption, the worst case scenario usually tested in people's planning models, are consistently exceeded by actual events. People's models of what might be a hurricane on the East Coast were consistently outdone by Hurricane Sandy. The damage to New Orleans was even greater than what was predicted by the models for a potential hurricane strike in that area. So one of the things that we need to do is both be conservative on our planning. We need to test our assumptions in our models, and I think that's good in that sensitivity testing that staff is looking at as well. I agree, moving the models out a little bit, looking at the pipeline assessment. This provides a one slice in time. It's not the bulk of our rate increase proposed. To look at what are we doing to finance the replacement of these pipes. It is something that forms a portion of the rate increase. It's true, we're all ratepayers. I do live here and represent the west side. I am not a millionaire. I am not wealthy. I live in a modest condominium apartment, and at that condominium facility, I am the president of our homeowners association. We struggle with this exact same issue on a small scale. People don't want to pay to repair the things that the association, under its articles of incorporation, is obligated to pay for. So there's two ways to do that: reducing the Mesa Water infrastructure issue to a small scale to that of a homeowners association. Homeowners association, in our case, is responsible to replace the roofs. There are two ways to do that. One is by saving over the lifetime of the roof. The people that own the roof and live in the house over 20, 25 years, they end up with a pile of money sufficient to replace the roof at the end of its useful working life. Everybody who's lived at the place and owns the place has their fair share and has had their fair share of the ups and downs of the savings, so we're not getting a lot of interest rate on savings. Or the other alternative is the term special assessment, which would be something that Mesa Water could also do. We could special assess, float a huge bond, which would result in a massive rate spike, and most people don't like that either. So it's one way or the other. We do need to look at all of our assumptions with regard to that, and I think that we will as we go further out. As we said, 5-year, 30-year, and 100-year. We're looking at these assumptions all the time, and I think that we can come up with a good plan to do that. Another item that was brought up, and I think this is a very good one, and this is something that we do, and I'm glad that it was brought up, and that's our costs of ourselves. What do we do? And I'll give a little homey example. One of the things that we do at Mesa Water, we own valves in the street. Valves must be turned, exercised on a regular basis so that they can be sure to be ready to be used in the event of an unplanned break or other problem in the system. The Mesa Water undertook a comprehensive study of exactly how much it costs to do each one of the specific maintenance tasks, and I have well over 40 specific breakdown maintenance tasks that we do for our water system, one of which is turning valves. Why I bring this up is because there are commercial companies that will do this service. And setting aside the anecdotal evidence that suggests that perhaps the companies don't do the work in the same level as people who have buy into the infrastructure, but assuming that the work is done to the same level of quality as our staff performs it, we compared the full costs of service for Mesa Water staff to an outside bid contract for doing the exact same work. Mesa Water was, if staff can correct me if I'm incorrect, at least 10% less than an outside bid source for that. Is that correct, Mr. General Manager?
Yes, that is.
Yeah. So we do that on a regular basis. We've done that, for example, with our fleet mechanic. We had a fine man who worked very hard here for a lot of years. He retired out of the district, and as Mesa Water does, whenever a retirement occurs, we look at the position. And do we need to replace that position? We looked at this from a hard-nosed economic analysis, and we looked at it in every way, and we found that the cost of maintaining our own individual fleet mechanic was greater than the outsource. So Mesa Water prudently outsourced that service, and we will review that prudent decision to outsource the service on a regular basis. It may be that at some day in the future, it may be prudent to insource that service. It may not. But the point is, we examine it on a regular basis. So I think that those kinds of things are excellent points, and one that hits to our wheelhouse of planning that we do. I agree. Assumptions can be changed. And they should be changed when merited. The assumptions used in our model are based on American Water Works Association standards, and the Water Works Association standards in and of themselves have their own bias or not. They are a national standard. We didn't make them up. We also take a critical look. We're going to be doing infrastructure assessment. One of the issues we have is much of the pipe underground, including the pipe that happens to serve my home, which was installed in 1951, is asbestos cement pipe. And with our water, our hard water, we don't have any problem with asbestos coming out of the pipe and into the water because of the hard water tends to form a scale protective layer on the pipe, so that's a good thing. Problem is asbestos is a brittle pipe subject to cracking and sudden unexplained failures, which begin to occur at about age 60 to 75 years, as studied in a national survey of the use of asbestos transite pipe nationwide. And the failures are mysterious and unrelated to any known surface cause. Just seems that the pipe has a tendency to have failures. Where I work at UC Irvine, my day profession is being the city engineer for UC Irvine, where I've been a large part of building $1.5 billion of capital infrastructure over the last 15 years. We have the same problem. We have asbestos pipes as our large water supply all over campus, and we have had mystery failures. No explained cause, no earthquake shift, no digging, no backhoe, no nothing. This pipe just broke. Plain broke. And most of Costa Mesa, huge portions of it, were put in with which was, at the time, a really good material. Everybody thought it was great. Doesn't corrode, doesn't have any problem with water, isn't going to fail, isn't going to rust like iron pipe. It's wonderful stuff then, and that's what was thought was to be the best at the time, but we didn't know what it was. So I think when we talk about making assumptions in our changes in our model, we need to look at that, and our engineering and operations committee will be looking at that on a regular basis and adjusting as necessary. We're justified based on our own surveys. If we find, for example, one of the things we do on a regular basis is replace valves in the street. When we do, that gives an excellent opportunity because the valve's out of the way. You can look at the pipe, both ends. It's going to be drained, dewatered. You can take a quick look, run a camera down. You can get ultrasonic thickness gauges. You can figure out the thickness, the remaining wall thickness of the pipe. There's other means of non-destructive examination of existing water infrastructure, which will help us determine remaining useful life, which may make us change our assumptions for the capital model. And I'm absolutely certain that Director Duane, Director Atkinson, President Fissler, Director Temianka will be right ready to make changes in our policy if justified based on engineering analysis. So it's something that I'm proud of that our district does well now, but we're not perfect. And I look forward to opportunities to make changes as needed. And I do look forward to looking at what we can do to help those who have, through no fault of their own, are stuck in a situation where the water bill has become burdensome to them. I know that we offer a water conservation program for people, and that's been successful in looking at people reducing their water rates or water consumption, not water rates, but their water consumption. And I believe that we can offer that service to anyone in the district. I think it's a very valuable service, gives you a chance to look at what your water use really is, and you might be surprised at how much you can save just by making some simple adjustments. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor to whoever you would like to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Bachmiller. Any other directors? Director Atkinson?
Yeah,
I think the board may recall in our earlier discussions that I had spoken in favor of this concept of spreading the increases across a wider period, achieving our 600 days cash, maybe another year farther out. So that's not really a new concept to the board. I know the board has considered it. We've talked about it. Although the decision was to go forward with the plan that we have before us tonight. And I was interested in the discussion of our world-class pipe system. I'm afraid what gets lost in that discussion of world-class is the term low water loss. And that's really what it's about is having an efficient piping system means the lowest water loss, which means the greatest savings to the ratepayers of Costa Mesa. So it's not that we take pride in having a, quote, world-class, unquote, system. It's that we take pride in having the lowest water losses that we've been able to achieve, and we look forward to achieving yet lower water loss rates. So I think it might be well for us to look at the potential for what that really means in terms of 1% of water loss in terms of cost to the customers. That may be a number we should be looking at the engineering committee and may give us some insights into how much pressure we want to put on looking at improving our water loss ratio. I agree that assumptions need to be looked at and they can be modified. We've done that from time to time here. We do that, I think, on a somewhat regular basis. When I say regular, in 5 to 10 year increments, I think. But I look at that scary chart, as it's been referred to, and look at the next 5 years and the amount of stuff that we've got potentially to look at replacement in the next 5 years. And I look at the chart for the next 10 years and the stuff that's potentially needing to be replaced in the next 10 years. And I look at the size of our reserves, and I have some very real concerns. If just 50% of what we've got projected for that 5 and 10 year period were to become a reality, it would make a significant impact on our reserve levels, and I'm sure that we'd be hard pressed to maintain our days cash ratio along with the AAA ratings. So I think our thought processes there have been very good in terms of protecting the ratepayers from those rate spikes that might come with having to go to bonded indebtedness for repair and replacement in the next 10 years. So, but with that, I will close just by saying that I do think it may be wise for us to look at spreading the rate increases across another year or two rather than pushing it all into the first 5 years. I think if we achieved the 600 days cash a year later than we've forecast, I don't think it's going to hurt us that much. I don't think we'd jeopardize our credit worthiness by doing that, as long as we keep that goal ahead of us. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Anything, Vice President Dwayne?
I'll just ask a couple more questions here. Do we still have the working relationship with Share Ourselves regarding the water bill assistance?
Yes, we do.
So for those in the audience, the district a number of years ago organized a relationship with the local charity called Share Ourselves. For those who could not pay their water bill, the district would accept payment from a third party named Share Ourselves to cover that, so that the persons whose bill is due and may have their water shut off would not have that occur. So there is a small charity for this purpose. So there has been a lot of discussion about number of days cash on hand. Unlike a city, the district owns 350 miles of pipeline. Those are all in place today. I'll ask the general manager, are there any fault lines that run underneath the city and those pipelines?
Yes, there are.
A significant number is my understanding.
Yeah, and mainly the Newport Inglewood Fault.
Newport Inglewood Fault's a big one and has the potential to release a significant earthquake. I'm familiar with this because of my experience at the Orange County Water District. That had to be considered in planning documents over there. If an earthquake were to occur, it is not uncommon for pipelines to break. Am I correct in that, Mr. Schoenberger?
Yes.
And if those pipes did break, would we have enough money on hand to replace and repair all of them at the same time?
No.
And what would we have to do?
We'd have to go out and to the market and borrow money.
Enter the capital markets at the very moment in time where we would need that AAA credit rating. So this is kind of like an insurance policy. You only need it once, and you need it once, and you need it to work that one time. So a AAA credit rating is like an insurance policy. So that day, when that day comes, and we all, I think, could probably agree that that day will come, when we need it most is the day that it has to be there. And you will not have time to build up the necessary cash reserves to obtain a AAA credit rating. Another question, where does the idea of 600 days cash on hand come from?
That came from our financial analysts as to what a AAA rating would require.
Is that so? And is that consistent with what the nationally recognized statistical rating organizations, the big three, are Standard and Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch? Is that consistent with what they tell us?
Yes.
So in other words, we didn't make this number up.
Correct.
This is consistent with the big three credit rating agencies that say how many days cash on hand you need. And so this is a metric, again, brought to us by an objective third-party expert recognized worldwide on matters like this. So I would say it's consistent with, again, providing the lowest possible cost of water by financing the operation of the district at the lowest possible cost. We are saving the ratepayers, especially the poorest folks in the city, the most money. Would you suggest, Mr. Schoenberger, that my statement is correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I have a couple comments. One, Mr. Morello and Mr. Ambergy, I mean, we do evolve as a board by hearing from our ratepayers. That's why we've increased our public outreach the last couple years. And as a board, no matter how the vote goes, I just want to say we really do appreciate you taking the time to work a long day, come prepare comments, come down here. It's not easy to come, we're here and maybe say some negative things to us, because the beauty is you're able to come right to the source of a water rate increase hearing to a special district and address your neighbors and friends that we have to look you in the eye at community events, at the grocery store, where you're locally, we're the best form of government. We're the closest to the people. We're not hidden in a city bureaucracy or a county bureaucracy. We know each other. And so I just want to say I'm happy to be part of a special district that allows this kind of government. I do want to, I don't want to get in a debate at all, but I wanted to give the courtesy of a couple thoughts about some of the comments that you made. And Mr. Ambergy, you said we have the power to raise rates if needed, and that's really true. We've been given the immense authority to set rates, and we have to take that very seriously. But we've also been given the formidable task of a mission that goes to the heart of having a healthy community, that there's water here, that the water's clean and safe, that it's abundant, that will attract people and businesses here. So we have a balance of the formidable mission and the immense authority we got, and that's what I try to do when I make a vote. Actually, when I make a vote, not only do I keep that in mind, I ask myself before every vote, is it legal? That's sort of a obvious bar, low bar. But then, is it ethical? Is it appropriate? And does it serve a public good? And every vote I do has to pass those four things. You mentioned, Mr. Ambergy, that You hadn't looked at your bills for a while, and your bill, I can't remember if you said $40 or $50. It seemed to be the last time we looked at one that was $150 now, recently. Not to argue with you, but our rates only went up 25% in 5 years, and so they didn't almost quadruple. So you might have been looking at a different time of year where you have higher water usage than what you remember. But I'm not laughing at you, arguing with you, because I've had many discussions with residents in the last 2 weeks, and they tell me my bill was $23 a month, and when they take it in half, because we bill for 2 months, and now it's $63, and I'm going, your rate tripled during a 25% rate increase. So we need to get to your home and do a water audit, because something else is going on. And it has to be higher water use, because the rates didn't go up that much. But I definitely appreciate that as myself as a senior on a moderate income, and as a ratepayer, anything we impose is imposed on myself. As far as those assumptions, and you were talking about changing the assumptions, and how can we talk about 100 years out? I'm not an engineering expert, but I do read the reports in detail. And what I read is this is a report called a Class 5 study, and it has a variance from a minus 30 to a plus 50, which means those prices could be 30% less than what they say, or 50% more. It is a very wide variance. And it showed $1.4 billion over like the next 78 years. So it could be 50% more than that, you know, $2 billion, or it could be 30% less, $1 billion. Either way, it's a lot of money, and it's something we just have to look out for. But it really has nothing to do with these rate increases, this 5 years, because that modeling is not minus 30 plus 50. It's pretty spot on, because it's just 5 years, this next $35 million in capital improvements. And Mr. Morello, yes, we are subject to the Brown Act. We cannot discuss our final decisions among each other at all. You did talk about the assumptions. You are an engineer, and I appreciate that. All I've done is read the reports, and again, it's a minus 30 to plus 50%. Mr. Atkinson, Director Atkinson, just talked about maybe extending this a year. We had looked at 5 or 6 rate scenarios. Some were with 5% across, 25% over 5 years, and got us things quicker. We looked at ones that were lower. What we took out of this one, this rate that we chose as a board, was the one that was the lowest cumulative 5-year rate increase that met our goals, and let's put 7% of that total rate increase towards reserves and to not issue debt. So we tried to pick the lowest one. And, you know, I'm thinking that, Director Atkinson, 1 cent of the 11 cent average per year is what's going to the reserves. So if we were going to stretch these reserves out a year, 1 more year, perhaps we could save 1 cent on a unit per year for 4 years or 5 years. So we could save 5 cents on a unit and then hit it up later. And the average user uses 15 units, so that could save 75 cents a month for the average user if we put this out 1 extra year, is my rough math. It would also cost us about a quarter of a cent or a third of a cent to resend out the Prop 218 cards. Now, we all have an option. We have an option as a board. These rate increases, they're up to. So if things turn in our favor, we do not have to reissue Prop 218 notices, I believe, Mr. Attorney, if we don't take the full rate increase in some years.
That's correct, Mr. President. What you could do is have a lower rate in a given year by board action for that year period.
Okay. Thank you. So as far as the comments to not raise rates or delay the funding of the rates, I can appreciate it that not wanting to fund what we believe are our needs and you believe are not our needs, but are, you know, maybe a wish list or something. But to not have a safe and reliable water delivery system to me is kicking the can down the road. There's enormous, I won't kick the can down the road. And there's enormous risks associated with a philosophy like that. And it's a decrease in reliability. It's a loss in service levels. There's a variety of increased risks related to health and safety and the environment, financial and other implications and consequences. And again, this task of this mission to have a healthy community and the power to raise rates all comes into balance with me. If there's no other director comments, I will declare the public hearing closed and entertain any motion for a resolution.
I'll make the motion to approve the proposed rate increase as projected because it is consistent with the mission of the district to provide water at the lowest possible cost to the ratepayer, because we have $35 million in capital improvements necessary to be completed in the next 5 years, and it is consistent with maintaining a AAA credit rating that will help us to finance the district's operation of the future for the capital replacement improvement of necessary infrastructure at the lowest possible cost to the ratepayer, and provide insurance such that if we were ever confronted by a catastrophe such as an earthquake, when we need that insurance policy, it would be there for us to use.
Thank you.
Mr. President, could I interpret Director Dwayne's motion to be to adopt resolution?
So I just said because, yes, adopt resolution, yes, please.
1439 as submitted.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you, Director Dwayne.
Second.
So we have a motion by Vice President Dwayne and a second by Director Timianka. I think we'll call for the question. This is a roll call vote. Mrs. Monteliari?
Director Atkinson?
No.
Director Bachmiller?
Aye.
Director Timianka?
Aye.
Director Dwayne?
Aye.
President Fissler?
Aye.
Motion carried 4-1.
Thank you very much. This brings us to reports and information items. Report of the General Manager.
Thank you very much. We do have a Finance Committee board meeting next Monday at 3:30. And happy holidays.
Thank you. That's it? That is short. Okay, director's reports and comments. We've pretty much all talked out, I would guess, but any further comments, Director Bachmiller?
One that happened to travel for my regular job, but this has something a little bit tangent to our district, and that is we received the Governor's Excellence in Economic and Environmental Leadership Award in Sacramento on Tuesday, and there were a total of 13 people who received this award. The University of California received it for its energy savings program, where we save over 50% of the energy used in research laboratories. So one of the
Sorry about the interruption, Director Bachmiller.
No problem. Thank you. It was a interesting thing that the California National Guard, and this has the connection to water, one of the little-known issues in the discussion with regard to medical or voluntary use of cannabis is the growth of it in the national forests in Northern California and other parts of the state. And when the people grow their crop and then harvest it, this is not organic farming. What they do is they divert streams and end up running it down running pollution, herbicides and other things down the rivers. And so in Northern California, the source of some of the water for Orange County, although fortunately not for Mesa Water now, is contaminated with herbicide runoff from illegal cannabis production. So the California National Guard over the last number of years has a program whereby they have, and they also receive what's called a GILA award for this, so it's something that directly affect our water supply. And I have no idea that they did this. It reduced over 400 tons of PVC pipe that was left behind, and over 10 tons, oh, by the way, because they happen to have meth labs as a sort of side profit. at these locations, they leave behind tons of toxic waste as well that the California National Guard has to come and pick up. So they received an award that helps protect our environment and our water supply in Northern California from the National Guard. It's kind of interesting. Didn't know that was happening. And I wanted to say, appreciate the staff, appreciate the members of the public who unfortunately left by this point, their hard work in coming down here to make comments. I do take them seriously, and the vote that I made was not without my own trepidation with regard to it, because it is a tough thing to look somebody in the eye and say, I just increased your cost of living. It's a plain fact. But that's why we do this here. It's why we carefully deliberate and look at it. My goal has always been at the lowest possible long-term cost. And I believe, based on everything I've read, that this thing that we just did helps result in the lowest possible long-term cost. And I think it was a good decision. And thank you very much, Mr. President, and for everyone here. Have a very good holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bachmiller. Director Timiaka.
Would also just like to thank the public who came out today. Most of our meetings we sit here and it's pretty silent out there. So it's good to have people in here and giving their thoughts. One of the things I said when I got on this board was I may not always agree with my board members, but I'll always be respectful. And when you guys come, we may not have agreed with what we decided to do, but we really do respect and appreciate you guys coming in today, giving us your thoughts, because we do absorb that. We do listen to your statements, and we'd love to see you guys here more often. So thanks for coming out. Happy holidays to the staff, to everyone who came out tonight, and my fellow board members. Thank you.
Director Atkinson, anything tonight?
Well, again, I echo the comments of the board. Thank you to the public that appeared tonight, and thank you for your well-taken comments. And to the rest of the board, thank you for the deliberations and considerations. And I know we'll see each other next week, but happy holidays to you all.
Vice President Dwayne.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you. And my closing comment, I guess I would say, is that no one up here, where elected officials, wants to raise rates. I mean, that is, it's much easier to kick the can down the road and have the next generation of board members say, what did they do? Why did they leave us in this mess? It's the easiest way to be reelected is to keep rates alone. But we have been tasked with a formidable task, as I said. And so it's the next to the last thing I want to do as a board member is raise rates. And the last thing I want to do as a board member is to leave our residents and their children vulnerable to not having an adequate water delivery system and the resultant consequences. So that's why I voted. It's the next to the last thing I wanted to do, but there was one worse. And with that, happy holidays, and thanks to everyone for attending. And I need to see when I am adjourning to. Lost that page. If someone can help. Here it is. We will adjourn to an adjourned regular board meeting scheduled for Monday, December 16th at 3:30 p.m. Good night, everyone.